1 in 5 children have or will have a serious mental illness. Likewise, according to a 2017 study by the National Institute of Mental Health, 1 in 5 American adults in a given year will face a serious mental illness. That's the equivalent of 43.8 million people. Across the globe, the World Health Organization estimates that 450 million people are facing mental illness. I don't throw all these numbers at you to scare you, but I do think it's an important thing to know how vast mental illness is. Despite these shocking numbers, I feel that mental health is not spoken about or formally taught enough, and I worry for the repercussions in the future if we do not rectify this issue. After doing extensive research on the subject, I feel that a valuable solution is mandating all middle and high schools to teach mental health classes. If this problem is not resolved, mental illness rates are expected to continue to rise. The world could be a much dimmer place in 10 or 20 years. If you hear me out though, we can help fix this problem together, and you can better take care of yourself and those that you care about. The problem is that we are not speaking about or formally teaching mental health enough. In a 2018 article on Medical News Today by Anna Sandoy, she summarizes the findings by a study done by Sarah Oswald at the University of Texas in San Antonio. The study found that the number of undergraduates seeking help for mental health issues rose greatly from the years of 2009 to 2015. The study examined 12 common mental health issues, such as depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. The 3 that I just named are the 3 that the study found the greatest % increase in. For context, anxiety rose 5.6%, depression rose 3.2%, and panic attacks rose 2.8%. By not discussing mental illness, we create a stigma around it. In a 2014 Psychology Today article by Michael Friedman, a clinical psychologist, he talks about how society as a whole has negative attitudes towards people facing mental illness. This mental illness leads the one who is facing the mental illness to be socially isolated and lonely. Well, it turns out that loneliness can be lethal. Social isolation is linked to poorer physical and mental health and even early mortality. In addition, social isolation can cause people who are facing mental illnesses to try to suppress the issue or hide them. Personally, I don't love speaking about my own mental health, but reading this research really struck a chord with me. When I feel lonely or socially isolated, that's when my mental health is at its worst. If we ignore this problem, like I said before, mental illness rates are expected to continue to rise. People are often afraid to talk about issues that they feel like they don't know much about. That's why early education and awareness training are both so important. The solution that I recommend is mandating that all middle and high schools teach students about mental health. Many teachers online agree with this solution. In a recent article on Western Governors University by Nancy Verrill, an esteemed and award-winning English teacher, she tells a story about a senior in her class who was facing mental illness. This student was the whole year a great student, and then she randomly became quiet and stopped doing her homework. She was very withdrawn and isolated. When school social workers spoke to the student, they discovered that she was depressed and suicidal and in need of immediate psychiatric intervention. With this solution, teachers and students alike can diagnose these problems earlier and help prevent them. In a 2018 article on US News by David Levine, a reporter covering behavioral and mental health, he talks about 3 different studies that found that teaching mental health to students improved their attitude toward treatment and increased their willingness to seek help from counselors. Now, you may think that teaching mental health in schools is simply putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, but we have to start somewhere. By teaching mental health to the younger generation, we can start a chain reaction that will trickle into the other generations. It will be more normalized for all. Even a Band-Aid starts a healing process. Imagine if we do nothing. If we do nothing, mental illness rates are expected to continue to rise, as that's what the trends say. Similarly, suicide rates are also expected to rise. If we implement my idea, though, we can normalize mental health and help people get the help they need. Do you remember that student that I spoke about a few minutes ago who was depressed and suicidal and in need of immediate psychiatric care? Well, she was hospitalized for a period of time, but with medication and therapy, she was able to return to school with the rest of the students, and she even was able to graduate with her class. I want all students and adults alike facing mental health problems to be able to get the help that they need. Though some states, such as New York and now Florida, teach mental health in schools, there is still a ways to go. I believe that all schools across the nation should teach it to their students. As I just said, Florida is a state that will already be teaching mental health to its students. So what you can do as Florida residents is reach out to your relatives in other states, explain the problem to them and tell them why you care. Encourage them to reach out to their state representatives so that eventually, hopefully, schools across the nation will be teaching mental health to their students. To summarize, there is much less of a stigma toward mental health than there was once before, but we still have such a long way to go. Teaching mental health will make people more comfortable discussing it with each other and getting the help that they need from professionals. Many people that I care about have been affected by mental health, and tragically, I've heard stories of young people my age taking their own lives. In fact, this past year, a young girl at my old high school took her life in the school auditorium during first period. I don't want anyone facing mental illness to have to face it alone. Our society is mentally unhealthy, and trends show that it's getting worse every year. By teaching mental health starting in middle school to students going through that pivotal transitional age and years of their lives, we can help trickle this effect and get everyone on board with understanding mental health and learning about it and taking care of it. Our society is bleeding, and it's our job to turn this trend around and save ourselves. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
How do you feel about schools offering kids mental health days?
Oh yes, this is something that I have heard about recently, and I think it's fantastic. In fact, states like Oregon and Utah are actually doing this now, where they're giving students an allotted number of mental health days, where just if they're not feeling good mentally, they can stay home. And I think that's so important. I've gone through those hard years, and there's days that you just don't feel up to it. And I think that'll make all the students in the system just much more comfortable and happy. Yes?
How do you feel about doctors prescribing medication?
All cases are different, and it can be great for some people, and I've heard people that I know have success with it, but I definitely think it's something to be careful with, just because medication sometimes can be a slippery slope, and it can have rough side effects for some people. And in a similar note, there's right now an opioid crisis, because doctors have been prescribing so many people after surgery opioids to help take care of the pain. So I just think it's something to evaluate on a case-to-case basis and just always be careful with. Thank you guys.